I hit go good.
What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Guys, we're doing something a little bit different today. We got a midweek live stream for you. There's a lot going on in the news, and so Nick and I were like, let's just sit down and kind of parcel things out. I will take a look. I have my computer over here. We'll look at the comments as they come in towards the end, but we have a couple of topics we want to get to. And so, Nick, I think the first topic of the day, we just sat together and watched the press conference for Rousey versus Carano.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously we have Ngannou versus Lins as well.
MVP Netflix.
Philippe Lins. And so Jake Paul, 5 years after basically starting MVP promotions, is now going to be dipping his toe into the MMA promotional world as well.
Right.
And I mean, he's got a pretty big card to start things off. Let me just silence this real quick. I can hear myself.
Uh-oh.
So,
yeah, you're right. So obviously Jake is jumping into the big side of the pool, the deep end, if you will. But the thing about big events like this is it's very similar to a boxing going out of business type of deal where, yes, they have one big event coming up and they've got two massive fights. I would assume they'll probably put 3 or 4 more fights on this card, but and they'll likely get some decent names. But we didn't hear anything about belts. We didn't hear any discussions about rankings. We didn't hear anything about divisions, really. What's on the line? Because both women in this press conference basically said this is a one-and-done type of thing. Ronda Rousey promised her husband she wasn't going to fight again after this one, and Gina Carano was basically saying, I'll just see kind of day by day how I feel. But as of right now, I feel like I can do one more. And I don't know if some of the questions that they were asking, some of the people in the audience got the press credentials and got to ask questions. They were saying, like, do you think this is the card that's going to be what starts the competition with the UFC, where Bellator and PFL and all these organizations have failed and there's nobody right now? It's truly a monopoly on the industry. Is this the card to start the competition? And the reality is one card can basically compete with one UFC card, but the UFC is doing 44 cards this year, and all the Contender Series stuff and all the Ultimate Fighter. So they're putting out so much more. For Jake Paul to really compete with Dana in the mixed martial arts world, he would have to get on so much more busy of a schedule for MMA fights. But if MVP stays just a spectacle events type of promotion and does an MMA fight once a year, couple boxing matches, maybe they get Francis and Jake Paul in there on a card to fight each other. I don't know if it'll be MMA rules or boxing, probably boxing. But those things aren't the best way for a longevity of a promotion. That's kind of a great way to make a bunch of business in a single night a couple times a year. And Netflix will always sign off on that. But I wonder how much people are really going to crave these type of competitions when all of the big names that we're relying on right now are in their 40s or pushing their 50s. And it's really starting to become one of those things where nobody has really any aspirations to fight more than once and hope to God they can make as much money as possible and even more than they made in their entire UFC career. So it's a weird battle. There's really no way you can directly compete with the UFC if you're MVP. But I certainly kind of understand what they're saying when they say, the White House card is going to compete with this Netflix MVP card because they're happening around the same time in the calendar year. And certainly you can make an argument that Ronda Rousey was a bigger name than anybody that's currently on the White House card. And you can say Francis Ngannou still has a lot of hype around his name because he's he's kind of like the modern day Muhammad Ali. He's kind of banned from fighting in certain places and he's made certain deals that some people like, some people hate. Ultimately, it's made him a bunch of money, but it has sacrificed multiple years of his career. So I wonder kind of how they're looking at that and how they see this as a long play, because you can only use these legends once or twice and there's not that many of them left.
Yeah, it was well said. So a couple of things that I had as a takeaway from this.
Okay.
I would love to see a real legitimate competitor to the UFC arise.
Sure.
I think this whole thing with the Conor Benn situation was really sort of what sparked it all off, right? Yeah. When Conor Benn got $15 million for one fight, and that fight is against Regis Prograis in a non-title fight, and I believe it's even at a catch weight, that basically kind of reset the deck for those big names in the UFC. Your Jon Joneses, your Conor McGregors. Now, Ariel Helwani, who was actually the host of this press conference, said that if Conor Benn is worth 15, that Jon Jones at minimum is worth 30 and Conor McGregor is worth 75.
Right.
Now, I don't disagree with that at all. But the UFC is not shelling out those type of paydays to the fighters. So it's really interesting because Jon Jones is now, the UFC is saying Jon Jones is retired.
Right.
Jon Jones is saying, I am not retired. Yes, I have hip issues, but every fighter has some sort of issue and I can still fight and I want to still fight. So if you're done with me, please allow me to be released from my contract and go seek business elsewhere. Now, why that's interesting, and before this press conference even started, I could have told you that Jon's name was going to be brought up a dozen times, which it was.
Right.
It's interesting for a couple of reasons, because PFL, they signed Jake Paul and Francis, but they never had this big marketing arm.
Right.
Same thing with Bellator. But why MVP to me feels like, if they want to go down the road of not necessarily being an immediate competitor, but putting on fights. So if you're talking about 6 fights a year that can rival UFC fights, they may have the ability to do it because Netflix is the biggest streaming platform in the world. Jake Paul is one of the most recognizable humans in the world, whether you love him or whether you hate him, everybody knows who he is.
Right.
He's got a lot of financial backing behind him. And if you could see a world, Nick, where Jon Jones does get released from the UFC, and maybe who knows what's going to happen with Tom Aspinall, but Jon Jones versus Francis Ngannou is one of the top 3 biggest fights you could make at heavyweight.
Without a doubt.
And it's very plausible to say that that fight is far more likely to take place outside of the UFC than in the UFC. Now, Gina and Ronda are both, Ronda's almost 40, Gina is over 40.
Yeah.
They're done after this. Ronda, the one exception may be if they can somehow work a Chris Cyborg Rousey. If Ronda gets in there and makes quick work of Gina, everybody always wanted to see Ronda versus Cyborg. Maybe they make that fight, and then that's the last one. I don't think Ronda would turn down 2 massive paydays.
Right.
But they can really do something behind Francis, because the heavyweight division, let's just call a spade a spade. As Brock Lesnar put it, we've got a heavyweight disaster on our hands right now.
Yeah. They might need to send the Brock signal out and get Brock back one more time.
And they might.
Yeah. We're at that point. And look, WME, TKO Holdings Company, Zuffa, UFC, it's all lumped into one. I don't expect them to go to the WWE to find somebody to fight in the heavyweight division, but they've done it before. Jon Jones being brought up in this, and obviously Francis Ngannou wants that fight. At this point, people want to fight Jon Jones because that's their only way to potentially steal the greatest of all time accolade, which he currently owns kind of across the board. That's why Alex Pereira really wanted that fight. And honestly, if Alex Pereira goes and gets that interim title, he's still not going to be considered the GOAT like if he were to have gone up and beat Jon Jones. Right. So it's interesting to me, and I agree with you that there's 0% chance Francis Ngannou ever fights for the UFC again unless Dana is no longer with the UFC. But Dana just signed a 5-year extension. By then, Francis will be 43, 44, something like that. So he will. I don't see that being an opportunity.
Well, he's got this lane now to make way more money with MVP.
True.
He's got Jake Paul. Jake Paul was on the mic. Jake Paul was there like the media, gets up and asks a question, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Which is also very interesting. And credit to Jake Paul, because Francis Ngannou said, I don't even want to fight you. I just want to kick your ass. And that's like a threat, right? I don't want to fight you and get the sanctioning bodies involved and have a night of business. I just
From
want to
the lineal heavyweight champion, I will remind you.
Right, exactly. That's the title they're going with. And Jake Paul took that and handled it with class, and then just went and asked a fair question. And Jake Paul has bigger stones than almost anybody in the world, because if you get knocked out by Anthony Joshua and make the kind of money you made, why would anybody want to get back in the ring with a guy of that stature who can punch as hard as that? And now he's picking a fight with Francis Ngannou. By the way, he's the one that's signing Francis's check. So I don't know if I would fire all my guns right at the promoter who helped me get the fight. And
I think they wanted that. I think they wanted the drama.
I agree too, but it felt a little bit weird that he just immediately broke bad, especially because Francis, the stories about Francis and promoters isn't exactly the best. And I can't wait to hear potentially if the PFL owners come out and give us their 2 cents on what happened with their relationship with Francis. But Jon Jones and Francis would be an awesome fight to see, even this late in both of their careers, but it's not going to happen in the UFC. And that's why Jon Jones is asking to be released. I think he still wanted in on the White House card. Not going to happen. But if he could somehow figure out a way to get Jake Paul to be the guy that pays him the money that Dana White refuses to pay him, and then he goes and fights Francis Ngannou, now you're talking about something very serious. And, Jon Jones deserves the kind of money that he's asking for. He deserves more than Conor Benn. I get that boxing structure and payout is different than UFC and MMA structure, but the reality is nobody had an issue with it until Dana inserted himself in boxing.
Right. And the checks were big, and they would always talk about the boxing checks. Like Eddie Hearn's writing these big checks. Bob Arum's writing these big checks. Al Heyman. Dana White had never written a big check.
Right.
And now Dana says, well, it's Turki Al-Sheikh that's writing the check. It doesn't matter. It's under your banner.
Right.
And Turkey has been involved with the UFC. They've put on events in the UAE and in Saudi Arabia.
He's been putting on a lot of events with Turki Al-Sheikh over there, and they've been writing the same checks that are peanuts compared to what now Conor Benn is getting. So I agree with you. That's an interesting it's a pickle that Dana White has found himself in, and I think he's going to wind up in a couple of battles. He's got Eddie Hearn right now. Now they're talking about boxing. I don't think if a promoter's boxing league takes place that any of them want to smoke with Jake Paul, but crazier things have happened, and I believe Jake Paul will try to insert himself into the sweepstakes of trying to box Eddie Hearn and Dana White. But this is starting to become a little bit like a spectacle to me. And the one thing you said about the competition and how this could potentially work is if Netflix only wants to do 6 events a year. I get that, but let's just say we only take the main event and everything else is filler. That's 12 people a year that you have to rely on. We just heard from the two girls in the main event. They're only doing one more, so you can't rely on them for another event later in a year or the next year. Who are the 12 legends that they could feasibly put together that makes any sense for a business to continue on some sort of schedule, even as light as 6 events a year?
Well, so what you'd probably have to run a couple of years in the red, right?
For sure.
Because you'd have to build a league. And you can kind of carry that with your 6 marquee events a year. Now, the question is, and a lot of people were talking about this before the Paramount deal, does the UFC do a deal like once the ESPN thing is over? Do they do a multi-platform deal where like a couple fight nights are on Amazon, a couple of fight nights are on Paramount?
Sure.
We've got some stuff on ABC maybe, and maybe ESPN does keep some percentage of it. Because when you look at other sports leagues like the NBA, the NFL, the NBA has stuff on TNT, and they've also got stuff on ABC and vice versa, and ESPN as well. So a lot of people thought that was going to happen. Now, Netflix as a streaming service, I don't think wants to do an every Saturday sort of deal.
No.
But if MVP says, hey, look, we're going to do an every Saturday deal, we're also going to do something with YouTube. Because remember, the last name Paul is one of the biggest names on YouTube.
Agreed.
So we're going to do some YouTube TV stuff. They're trying to get that going a little bit more. We're going to stream it on Jake's MVP platform as well as Jake Paul's personal platform and stuff. So you're talking about garnering some serious eyes. You would have to build a league. But what do you need to build a league? You need marketability, which Jake's got the best marketing team that money can buy. You need the outlets, which they have. You need the money, which they have. The only thing that they don't have is the fighters.
Right.
But there's a lot of we talk about this all the time when we do deep dives on this show. Just look at how damn good these kids are that are coming up now, like 13, 14, 15 years old.
Right.
These kids are all these kids are Gen Z or whatever the heck the new generation is called. Whoever's up next, they don't even maybe know who Dana White is, but they damn sure know who Jake Paul is.
Right.
And if they start to sign the talent of tomorrow, this is not we're going to put on this Netflix event and all of a sudden we're a rival to the UFC.
Right.
Well, I'm talking a 10-year play down the road.
Right.
They have to be able to string these big events together to kind of garner some attention in the interim. But if you build a league big enough and you're paying an appropriate amount of money to these fighters, you absolutely can attract the talent that is in their teenage years right now to your promotion. Now that's far down the road. I want to kind of go back to what could happen next. So what do you think the odds are that Jon Jones does get released from his contract, and before the end of this year we could see Ngannou versus Jones on MVP, on Netflix, or wherever that's going to take place?
Unfortunately for Dana White, he's the one that came out and said Jon Jones is retired, and now he's the one that got Jon Jones prompted to ask for release. And make no mistake about it, Felipe Lins is the guy that could fog a mirror that they signed for Francis Ngannou. He hand selected him apparently, and he liked that matchup.
It was supposed to be Rico Van Hooven, we found out at the press conference.
Right, who was originally supposed to come to the UFC, and the biggest issue was the fighter pay. He was like, I'm not going to get paid enough, so let me go do something else, especially if I'm going to have a hard fight in the UFC where people could potentially take me down. I'll just go deal with a boxer. And that's exactly what he decided to do. But Jon Jones will absolutely replace Felipe Lins and potentially take that main event spot. If they could somehow get Jon Jones released from the UFC and eligible to fight on this Netflix card, now you take the girls, unfortunately, move y'all to the co-main event because we've got the heavyweight title for MVP or whatever it is.
They would make a lineal heavyweight belt, and they would just carry on.
And now that card right there, if you insert Jon Jones onto this card, and unfortunately for Felipe Lins, take him out of it and put Francis versus Jon, that can absolutely rival and potentially beat out the White House card as far as streaming's concerned. But I just don't see how Dana White is going to play this situation, because he's the one that said Jon Jones doesn't have any more fights. We're not looking at booking Jon Jones. The only thing he was looking forward to, and Jon was pretty transparent a while ago, almost a year ago, the only thing I want to come back for is a White House spot, main event or something like that. And it really does suck, because you can feel Jon Jones is frustrated with the situation. And now he's finding out the one guy that he could fight and drum up a lot of business with is Francis Ngannou, the one guy who's out of the UFC. And if he's being held down to avoid being put on that card with Francis, then that's wrong by the UFC. They shouldn't be able to tell him he's not allowed to fight, especially after all he's done for the sport. And I get Jon Jones has done a lot of bad, but he's also done a lot of good for the sport. And he's put on the most incredible performances. He has the most historic.
He's been a relevant fighter for almost 2 decades. I think Jon's 38 now. What was he, 23 when he won the belt? So, I mean,
youngest champ. Yeah. He's done so much. He deserves one or, maybe one huge payday. And look, $15 million for Conor Benn isn't even the craziest deal in boxing, right? It almost feels like a bargain compared to some of those guys you see.
Well, no disrespect to Conor Benn, but in my opinion, until further notice, Conor Benn is like a European champion kind of level.
Yeah, there's no way he's half the star that Paddy the Baddy is. And they're from the same area. And I get that maybe in boxing, in the boxing world, but I keep a pretty close eye on MMA and boxing. And I know who moves the pop culture. And for sure it would be Paddy the Baddy over Conor Benn.
Well, I had lunch the other day with one of our longtime friends, Tim. He's a big boxing guy. So I wanted to ask him, I was like, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know boxing like you do. Like, is Conor Benn a bigger deal than I think he is? And he's like, no, he's like exactly what I thought. He's like European championship level fighter. Right. He's got somewhat of a recognizable name in Europe and not so much else. And now when that payday gets issued out and it gets disclosed, that reshuffles the deck. And I think that makes negotiations for Jon, for Conor, for Alex. I mean, Alex is just such a company guy that he just loves to fight. He'll fight anybody. He's legendary. But I think what Ronda Rousey said at this press conference was that we need to forge something that is going to be a competitor to the UFC, that's going to get fighters paid in accordance with what they're paid and what their value is in other sports. Yeah. And that's the way. And she called, I think the word that she used was talent leak. And so that's not to say that you're not signing the best fighters. That's to say that the best fighters are the people who would have been the best fighters aren't even going into fighting because the pay's too low. So it's like, man, I'm genetically gifted. I'm going to go try for the NFL. I'm going to run, and go play ice hockey or something like that. Right. If you're from Canada, I'm trying to think of different examples from different countries.
If you're a risk taker and you have the ability and the health and everything to go for a professional sport, sure, you would want to go where they're going to pay you a bunch of money. And if you have the ability to go to the NFL or NBA or any of that, you're going to avoid something that could only pay you what a $60,000 or $80,000 a year job can pay you for the people at the ground level. Like, if you're going to be a risk taker, then go for the thing that's going to pay you $100 million over a 10-year career, rather than the thing that first, you can probably get to, but it's only going to pay you $150,000 to $1 million. It's not going to pay you the kind of money that you're expecting. And for risk takers, they're just going to take that risk all day long. Yeah.
And okay, so let's move on a little bit, because there's some more stuff in the news. Want to start with Ilia Topuria, Islam Makhachev. These two are going back and forth.
Yeah.
So Islam saying that, or Ilia came out and said that once again, Islam is ducking him.
Mm-hmm.
He all of a sudden pulled a hand injury out of nowhere when they were in negotiations for the White House fight.
Yeah.
Which in turn gave us the Gaethje versus Topuria fight for the 155 undisputed.
That must have been what Mick Maynard was freaking out about on
that
stage.
That also makes sense because didn't you say that Mick handles 170?
Well, I think he does.
And
I know he does heavyweight in the ladies, but I think there's one more division he does.
Yeah, I think he does heavyweight, the women, and 170.
Okay.
So that would make sense why Mick was the one that was kind of, you know, the first to know.
Most affected, yeah.
But so Ilia comes out and says that once again Islam's ducking. Islam comes out and says, LOL, yeah, right. You know, I'll fight you for free, basically.
Right.
I'm paraphrasing.
Right.
But you know, these two are going back and forth. And here's my take on that whole thing, right? I think that the only risk is if you have a blemish from either one of these two on the way to fighting each other. But this only makes their potential fight bigger, right? It's continuing the narrative and it's building the anticipation. The only issue is if Justin somehow upsets Ilia and very likely Ian Gary were to upset Islam Makhachev. So if you get past those two opponents, this fight's actually maybe end of 2026 even bigger than it is now, in my opinion. Do you agree with that?
Well, here's the thing. I do agree with you, but I would say that if Islam's out for right now, and we don't have to worry about him fighting in the summer on International Fight Week or at the White House, if he's injured, has to take care of his hand, we could assume then that Ilia Topuria fighting in June will be available to fight at the end of this year. And you know they love to put Team Khabib, Team Islam in that MSG card at the end of the year.
Or in Abu Dhabi, which is usually in October.
Yeah, I think October, you're right. So the timing works out where Ilia could be – I don't think that Islam Makhachev has to defend one more time at 170 before they allow somebody else to come up. I do think Ilia needs to defend one more time at 55 before he's allowed. But if Ilia does what we think he's going to do to Justin Gaethje and doesn't take much damage – then it would make sense that there's nobody at 170 that's more compelling right now, and you would preserve Islam. You don't have to worry about him getting knocked out by Morales or point decision lost by Ian Gary or somehow wrestled up by Usman. Right? These things aren't going to happen if he doesn't have to fight. And I don't think that they would need to both fight if Ilia fights and defends the belt one time at 55, and then they say, look, this is a crazy thing. We have an international superstar going for undisputed triple champ status, which is one step above what Alex Pereira is going for at the White House.
Yeah.
And I think that could actually be the path that we're looking at.
So you're saying, like, hypothetical situation, Ilia makes quick work of Justin Gaethje. He gets out unscathed and then does a quick turnaround.
Assuming that Islam can't fight in the summer, but after this hand injury that he has or doesn't have, that he could fight later in the year.
Well, you know, also it would be not another massive weight cut again. So, you know, it's hard to do those turnarounds because of the weight cutting for the most part, right? If you have no injuries, the weight cutting tends to be the biggest issue.
Yeah.
So if we're going up 15 pounds, then that's kind of a non-issue.
Right.
The only thing I'll say to that is, it does kind of hold 170 up. And when you have Morales and you have Gary that are super exciting, and when we don't know when Shavkat's coming back, but he will certainly be in the mix when he comes back, and Carlos Prates, there's just a lot at 170 that I would hate to see the next title fight at 170 be contended at the end of the year and it be Ilia because of the fact that the division is so hot. But sometimes you do sacrifice certain things to make big fights. So you can't have your cake and eat it too. And that would be one of those scenarios.
Well, and at the end of the day, at 170 right now, with Shavkat out of the equation, unfortunately for all of us, we have Ian Gary, Michael Morales, Carlos Prates, and Jack Della Maddalena has to be added in there because he's fighting Carlos Prates. So if we have those two, why not book Morales versus Gary? And then, the next, whoever is most impressive out of those, especially keeping a closer eye on Gary versus Morales, gets the next title shot. It really doesn't kick the can that too far down the road, especially, like I'm saying, if Ilia can get through the summer fight at the White House and then be cleared to fight by October or something like that. That could actually, I don't even think it would mess up the schedule too bad, because we have 4 people at 170 that are all within one win away from being undeniable and a better option than Ilia. But if Ilia beats Justin Gaethje, I can't say with none of them having fought in their next fights, JDM fighting Carlos Prates and Ian Gary and Michael Morales potentially fighting, that they would be one step above or more deserving than Ilia.
So if you had to put a percentage on it, 0 to 100, likelihood that we see Islam versus Ilia before the end of 2026.
Well, I will say that we have. I'd say there's probably better than
I say 75%, just to give you some context.
Okay, yeah, I'd say right around 50-50 because I don't know what we're dealing with this injury, if it's a whole bunch of nothing or if it's actually something he has to go take care of. But I do predict Islam fights one more time. And I also predict that the UFC has Ilia fight this time in the summer and then fights one more time, because we haven't seen Ilia fight in a few months. And I get that his break that he took at the beginning of this year really wasn't all that long. He kind of dealt with what he had to deal with pretty quickly and drama free. You know, whatever drama it was, it didn't really leak over to the UFC world that bad. Like, we got our input, but for the most part, he dealt with it. And then he goes, okay, now I'm back. I needed my 2 months. Now I'm back. And I think he wants to be active. So
it's going to be almost a year to the day that he won that belt over Oliveira when he fights Gaethje.
There you go. Oh, and then you're speaking of Oliveira, who just fought, and obviously he had a very dominant performance, although it wasn't a BMF style performance. Still one of the most high level performances at 155 we've seen in years.
It's being criticized because of the BMF belt.
That's it.
If you take the BMF belt off the table, that's an absolutely outstanding performance against a very good opponent.
Incredible. Maybe the best performance of his career. And that's
one of them. Yeah.
And so then you have the interesting thing where if Ilia is willing to give up the belt for the time being, you could have Charles Oliveira rematch Arman Tsarukyan this time for the belt, while Ilia goes up to 170. It kind of clears some things up at both divisions. And if Ilia, if he decides he wants to move up to 170 and stay up there, now the 155 division is back to wide open, and then you've got your stars that can potentially be created in Arman and Patty and BSD, the future.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think is going to happen. Yeah. So, I don't want to not give Justin a chance, because I do believe Justin has a chance.
Right.
I believe it's small, but I believe he has some windows, and there's some opportunities that are going to present itself for Justin. My prediction will be made as the fight gets closer. Everybody who watches this show on a regular basis knows we do deep dives into really important fights, and we go back and watch fights, and we do like a 30 to 45 minute episode on one specific fight, and we will certainly do one for this. But so I'm not going to make my official prediction until after I see everything. But I don't think
I can't imagine my early prediction is going to be any different than my official prediction.
Yeah, I don't think my opinion is going to change, but I don't want to give Justin no credit. He there are ways he can win that fight, but if he doesn't, or if he's not able to win the fight, Ilia makes quick work of him, or let's say it is a kind of a dragged out fight, I think his next move is 170. As much as I would love to see Ilia stick around and fight Arman, and I think that actually might be good for business and for Ilia, because honestly, nobody's drawing the eyeballs that Tsarukyan's drawing right now outside of the octagon. This guy is a viral hit machine as far as social media is concerned. But I do believe they're going to Ilia will go up to fight Islam, which will create a vacancy at 55, which you will then get the rematch of Oliveira versus Tsarukyan for the vacant undisputed.
I hear that, and I think you're onto it. But what about this? We're always talking about the GOAT conversation, and we really do in the modern era, at least, have a 4-man race. Alex Pereira, Jon Jones, Islam Makhachev, Ilia Topuria. That's kind of the modern era's GOAT discussion. And at this point, they're having to just one-up each other, right? So we've got Poatan going up for an interim third title, potentially, if he beats Cyril Gane. Ilia Topuria wants 3 undisputed titles. But the interesting thing about Ilia is he's not as big as Islam Makhachev naturally. Islam Makhachev, if he had it his way and he could make it, I believe he'd want to defend 2 belts at once. Now, what's the one thing that you can do to say I'm for sure better than Islam Makhachev if you're Ilia Topuria?
Defend both belts,
Right. I have 3 belts. He has 2. I defended 2 of the belts. He never, he didn't defend simultaneously any of them.
Yeah, or win, vacate, and go back to 55. Because honestly, like, the Islam matchup makes sense. But to me, Michael Morales versus Ilia Topuria really doesn't, make a whole lot of level sense,
unless he beats Islam, then we're having a different discussion.
But okay, let's say your opinion here. Islam Makhachev, and maybe Chris, you can even, or maybe I'll put it in the chat here when we finish chatting, but Islam, let's say Ilia goes up and beats Makhachev, hypothetically. What are you then more excited to see after that? Michael Morales / Ian Gary versus Ilia, or Ilia go back down and fight Arman? For me, it would be Arman.
Yeah, so Arman is doing everything right, and I'm becoming more and more of a fan of Arman every time he puts something on the internet, and he's able to get the eyeballs. So I think it's only a matter of time before he is just something that is undeniable for the UFC, and they have to give him his opportunities. And I honestly think that him versus Ilia would deliver as a promotional type of fight, especially if you let him kind of use this momentum that he's got. One more fight with Charles is fine with me. Everybody knows Charles, and I believe Arman can beat him in a rematch, even if the fight is 5 rounds. But then if Ilia's up busy doing stuff up there and Paddy the Baddy can get one more win, they will put him back in a title fight. And so if you have Arman and Paddy, now you're going to have nothing but viral moments for the entire 3 months that those guys are paired up with each other. And honestly, you can't go wrong either way, pairing either one of them up with Ilia. Maybe not competitively. I don't think Paddy has the chance to beat Arman or Ilia. But as far as a numbers thing is concerned, Ilia or Arman fighting and winding up with a belt or winding up in title fights at 55 against Charles Oliveira, Paddy the Baddy, these type of names, Mauricio Rufy maybe he's kind of a little bit further away, but these type of names could raise his name even more. And when you've got 2 guys who are doing these kind of numbers on social media, which is great because you can actually see them, right? We see when Conor McGregor posts how many people see it and how many engagements and impressions. We see Arman, we see Ilia, and maybe those 2 guys single-handedly can't compete with Conor McGregor. But if you look at both of their numbers combined and start to add them up, you go, okay, we might have a fight here on our hands that could for sure rival a Conor McGregor night of business.
Yeah, Arman versus Ilia is a huge night of business.
Not as big as Ilia and Islam.
No, it's not.
But if the timing's right, and let's just say we can get Arman and Paddy and Arman and Charles before then Arman can continue to rise. And now we're talking about a closer comparison.
Yeah. And the thing about Ilia, to me, his stock even rose in the BMF fight and he wasn't even involved in it. I mean, Charles was trying those same types of takedowns on Ilia early in the fight.
Sure.
Ilia just immediately got double unders and shucked him off and kept the fight on the feet.
Well, and everybody's pointing to the grappling from the BMF fight this weekend between Max and Charles. And obviously 22, 23 minutes of it was grappling, but Charles was getting the better of the exchanges as well. That's what bothers me about his performance. He was hurting Max way more than Max was hurting him. He was landing the cleaner shots. And he wasn't able to do any of that with Ilia. I mean, he landed significantly less stuff on Ilia than even Max did. So it's an interesting situation.
Ilia really is that good, man.
Yeah.
And I think that's why when you have a generational guy like this, that's why you have to, because Islam's a generational guy too.
Yes.
Islam is, a lot of people, because he's a humble guy, right? And because he respects Khabib so much, he allows himself to operate under the shadow of Khabib. But this guy, I mean, stands on his own like nobody's business. He's one of the best fighters we've ever seen inside the octagon. And some people don't like him because he's not knocking people out like Ilia is. But make no mistake about it, these 2 are 2 generational talents. And it would be a shame if they never got in there with each other. So
100%.
As hot as 70 is right now, I do think you have to make the fight. A division that's not so hot, but it's heating up. 185.
Yeah. And it was hot last year, or I'd say a year and a half ago. It was on fire, and then it kind of settled back down again.
Yeah. And forgive me, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but some Russian media outlets came out and said that basically it was kind of a cryptic tweak, but not so cryptic. Hey, Sean Strickland, whoever's managing him, make sure you don't book any podcasts for him after May 9th because you won't be able to talk with your jaw wired shut. Now, this is a guy who is got his ear to the ground with the Russian fighters. He's very close with Chimaev. And so if he's saying this, if he's tweeting that out, that kind of indicates May 9th is a Saturday. That's the Newark, New Jersey fight. UFC, what is that, 328?
Yeah. The Russian link, brother.
Very likely that we see Sean Strickland versus Khamzat Chimaev as the main event on that. Yeah. So couple of questions. Are you okay with Sean jumping Nasruddin to get that fight? And if that fight's made, do you think that will be Khamzat's last fight at 85?
So I get why Sean Strickland would jump Nasruddin. It does sort of suck because it felt like we were promised the winner of the 4-man tournament at the end of 2025 would get Khamzat Chimaev. And obviously we want to see some activity at 185. We'd love to see Khamzat Chimaev, defend his belt one or two more times and then move up. I think it's only right to let a guy as dominant as him go up and test for champ status if he gets to that point. But at the same time, Nasruddin Imavov hasn't done near as much as Sean Strickland to get the attention. And when you're dealing with the Paramount era, you're dealing with the new people that are in control of the UFC, they're not looking at merit versus merit, or they're not looking at exclusively skill versus skill. They're looking at numbers, and they know that Sean Strickland, even though he is a pain to deal with, and they probably hate having to censor him and all that stuff,
cut his mic, all the stuff,
which is ridiculous too. And I love real quick. I know we were jumping on Dana a little bit earlier, but I love what he answered when Sean Strickland fought last. He won that fight, and he was like, they were like, "What do you think about all the crazy stuff Sean Strickland says on the press conferences and in the fight buildup?" And then he's like, "Well, did you ask anybody else what they thought about the Super Bowl and Bad Bunny?"
No. Those people asked those specific targeted questions to Sean for a specific effect, and they know exactly. They knew exactly what they were doing when they did.
They knew exactly what his reaction was going to be. Even if they, all you have to do is go to Twitter, see what his reaction is, and then they're just finding the things that seem to get under his skin the most, or at least just get him to feel compelled enough to write something about him.
And they're in the game of viral moments. I get it. They're looking for the clicks. We know that game. They want eyeballs on YouTube and stuff like that.
But if you want to be a part of the viral machine, don't get mad at the vessel that gives you the viral content for doing the things that you are provoking him to do. So I believe that Sean Strickland, even though some people might look at him as hard to deal with, he's a great fighter. He's had history with Khamzat. They've trained together. So I believe between the two of them, they know who's going to win that fight. And I just feel like Sean Strickland deserves that kind of opportunity because he's willing to throw it all on the line. Nasruddin Imavov hasn't even really made as much of a noise. It's crickets as far as I've heard, because it seems like Sean Strickland basically took that spot and he didn't say anything about it. I'm not seeing anything. Nothing's going viral. If I was Nasruddin, maybe you go buy huge orders of food and start eating like Armin to get the attention. I don't know what you do, but you have to do something to compete, because in this industry, as so many people say, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right?
Well, that in the Paramount era, that's never been more true. And it wasn't that long ago that Sean soundly beat Nasruddin Imavov, right? So true. I wouldn't be okay with it as I am had that not happened, but that did happen. Yeah, and true. So, Sean has trained with Khamzat. Now, we saw Sean defend takedowns beautifully against Fluffy Hernandez. Fluffy Hernandez is not Khamzat Chimaev. There are reports of people that have watched Khamzat train in person that say this guy is just different. Yeah. He's ragdolling Olympic level wrestlers. He's outstriking some lights out strikers.
Khalil Roundtree, he's been training.
Yeah, he's training with Khalil. Like, he's giant, he's strong, he has all the skills. I mean, look at DDP. DDP is massive,
tank
for 185, and he's a tank, and he's a good grappler in his own right. I'll remind you, DDP can win a fight by submission all day long.
And a hard puzzle to solve. Nobody else had solved it prior.
Khamzat is built a little bit different. Now, let's just walk down the fantasy road for a minute. Okay. If Sean Strickland can defend the takedown, Khamzat can have some trouble, because Sean's jab is unlike anything Khamzat's ever faced. Sean's combinations are really good. He's got excellent head movement. Khamzat cannot win a stand-up fight with Sean. So if that fight is to be made, it's going to be predicated on Khamzat getting him to the ground. Now, the good news for Khamzat is he's never shown us that he can't get somebody to the ground.
Correct.
But if we see more minutes on the feet than we've seen in fights before, it could get interesting.
Yeah, for sure it can be interesting. And I don't want to say that Sean Strickland doesn't have the ability to go make a game plan with his coaching team and that can at least give Khamzat a few things to think about, right, on his way into getting the takedowns. It's inevitable when you fight Khamzat Chimaev. If he doesn't knock you out like Gerald Mearstart, you will get taken down.
Yeah.
And, some guys, some high-level wrestlers have been able to get back up. Look at the 170 guys, Usman and Gilbert Burns. Both of them did just fine, and they made it the distance with Khamzat Chimaev. But that was a Khamzat going to 170. I believe the move up is actually beneficial, and he's able to showcase more cardiovascular ability. And honestly, which that's the biggest thing, right? If he was cutting so much weight that he was killing his gas tank, but he's also such a gung-ho fighter that he's just going nonstop until he goes for the finish. If you don't get that fight done, and now you got to deal with somebody like Sean Strickland on the feet, it's a big issue. But I don't know if Sean Strickland's going to be able to wrestle like Usman and like Gilbert Burns. He has to make it a dogfight. And the difference is Sean Strickland will make it a dogfight, but not before he makes it a point fight.
Yeah.
And he will point fight you to a decision all day long. And he'll also point fight you until he hurts you and then go for the finish. But it's very interesting. And I don't see how he would be able to avoid the takedowns long enough in every round to win a decision victory over Khamzat, which I think would be his best chance.
Yeah. So I've had my computer over here the whole time. We've been ignoring the chat. We probably should get to some of the questions here. So Chris, you've been sort of monitoring it. Is there anything that's popped up? So let's see here.
Yo, everybody.
What's up, everybody? Constantinos, thank you so much.
Let's go.
Good to see you, my friend. Thanks for popping in the live chat.
Thank you.
Let me see here, Chris. Trying to get the comments pulled up, and I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties. If you could bear with me. All right. Okay, Torin Brown, what's up, man? Good to hear from you. Thanks for joining the live chat.
Yo.
Heard Oliveira made $800,000 for the fight versus Holloway at 326. Honestly, that sounds a little low for Charles.
It sounds a little low. There's no title on the line, though. And does that mean it was $400K plus $400K, or is it an $800 flat fee? Because some fighters, depending on how far into the UFC they are, they have flat fees. And Charles for sure qualifies for that based off of some of the other people who have it. But yeah, I don't know if it's 800.
I think
plus
Sean
800.
Strickland made $1.2 million to fight Fluffy. I just have a hard, and I don't know if that's confirmed.
Yeah,
but I have a hard time believing that Charles made less than Sean.
Yeah, on a BMF title too, as opposed to a fight night.
So we got Real Madrid 1. Thanks for coming into the chat.
Thank you, brother.
I don't think Dana wants Ngannou at the UFC. Yeah, I think that ship has sailed. That ship. I mean, what would you say on a scale of 0 to 100% that Dana or the UFC brass would ever try to work something out with Francis to revive the heavyweight division?
Well, if you take Dana at his word, it's 0%. I don't think he wants to do anything in the same atmosphere as Francis Ngannou. He's totally fine with parting ways. And look, Dana White has more experience with Francis Ngannou than any other promoter. He has the most fights for Francis Ngannou as his promoter. So he understands how he is to deal with. And if he truly doesn't like doing business with a guy, then and he can go back to the analytics and see just how successful Francis Ngannou was, he can say, all right, is it worth it? Is it not? Conor McGregor is a far bigger star than Francis Ngannou. And Conor McGregor may be hard to deal with at times, but Conor McGregor seems to not be as big of a thorn in the side for Dana as Francis Ngannou, which means he's still willing to deal with some of the nonsense, if you will, to make sure Conor McGregor gets one more fight because he knows it's such a big night of business. If Francis Ngannou was pulling the numbers that Conor McGregor was pulling, especially in his prime, then we'd probably be having a different conversation where the brass that's now in charge of Dana White would be saying, we really need to look at bringing this guy back. Yeah. We let him go do his boxing thing. Let's just amicable so we can make some money and he can make a little bit of money. We'll pay him a little bit more. I just don't see that happening again until Dana White potentially leaves the UFC. But I don't see that happening because he just signed a 5-year deal. By then, of course, Francis is in his mid-40s, mid-50s, no, but mid-40s, and it just isn't near as compelling.
Yeah, it wouldn't make sense at that point. Chris, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty scrolling these. Can you see them on your end and kind of just call them out to us?
The eldest scroll.
That would be a little bit easier if you can. So, yeah, I mean, Francis, I think that I put that at less than 10% that the UFC would re-sign him in any capacity. I think, and quite honestly, I think there's a lane for Francis to make good money now with MVP. Yeah. I think that was kind of established today at the press conference. Like, Francis is going to finish out his fighting career, his MMA fighting career with MVP. Who knows if he'll go back and do a little boxing. Mm-hmm. But there's Rico Van Hooven, who we know we found out today was in talks for that fight with Francis, but decided to go fight Usyk. But after the Usyk fight, why not? Yeah. Right? You've got Jon that's potentially going to be let go by the UFC. I know he's asking for that. Mm-hmm. So why not? There are some fun fights that you can do. I mean, Jake Paul is more of a gimmick fight, right? But I mean, Francis he's into the business of making money.
When you talk about business, and particularly in the heavyweight division, if you take the current landscape of the UFC's heavyweight division, with Jon Jones apparently being retired, the interim title up on the line is only up because Tom Aspinall can't see, and he just signed with Eddie Hearn, by the way, which that comes into this point later. So we've got Cyril Gane, a guy who has already been beaten 4 title fights, right? I think he's had 4 or 5 title fights. We have most people think Gable Stevens going to come and save the day, but we need a couple of years for that. We have Alex Pereira, but we also know that Alex Pereira probably has 3 or 4 fights.
Yeah, he's on the tail end. Yeah,
right. And then he's going to go look to for sure jump into that pool of legends. Maybe go do some kickboxing or some boxing, something like that. I can imagine if Rico can get a fight with Usyk, Alex Pereira can get a fight with Usyk. And
exactly. That's the kind of, he's going to, if you're Alex, he's going to fight out his contract and go look for those opportunities.
100%. And I don't blame him, especially if there's a $20-30 million payday at the end of it. And so we'll just take the division for what it is right now. You still got your Curtis Blades. You still got your Waldo Acosta. You still got those people. No more Dalton Almeida, but you still have your people. And Tom Aspinall
fights Francis.
Yeah, you know what? That's another one. I didn't hear his name brought up at all for it, but it's somebody. He had a good streak and has beef with the UFC, so they have something in common. But with Jon now asking for his release from the UFC, if you have Francis Ngannou, who, you know, one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, one of the biggest power punchers, and one of the biggest heavyweight stars of the modern era across all combat sports, him. You've got potentially Jon Jones if he's released. You've got Tom Aspinall not very happy with the UFC with a brand new manager named Eddie Hearn, who's going head-to-head with Dana White. And
potentially in a boxing match.
Yeah, potentially they might even throw down and get into it. But at the same time, he's saying Tom Aspinall is getting 1/10 to 1/15 of what he deserves. And I believe I can get him those fights. If he can do that, Tom always wanted to be a boxer. I believe that Tom Aspinall is a prize fighter and he wants to test himself against the best in the world. Now, I don't see him being the best heavyweight boxer in the world, but I certainly see him taking the risk and trying to go fight the best heavyweight boxers in the world for 15x what he's currently getting in the UFC, especially because of the treatment he's been getting. I mean, he became the undisputed champion on an live video.
Yeah,
you know, and just as fast as they gave that to him, they can take it away.
And they will too.
And they will. So I don't think Tom should be as in the business of being a company man now with this heavyweight avenue sort of opening up. And again, there's not a long road. I believe Francis Ngannou would fight a couple times. I believe Jon Jones would fight once. I believe Alex Pereira would fight maybe once or twice. But if you're talking about all these guys looking at these big paydays and saying, how can I fight this contract out and get over there, at least for a couple of them? You're talking about a slippery slope for the UFC's heavyweight division because they have nobody in the rearview mirror coming up at all that seems like a formidable person other than Gable Steveson, who to this day, as far as I know, is not signed.
Well, and that begs the question, is MVP talking to Gable?
Whoa.
Because, you know, you talk about building right now, as it stands, there's no way that MVP can come close with competing with the UFC.
No.
But they can have a better heavyweight division than the UFC has.
And that's the most important division.
If they were to get Gable and Francis and Jon,
that's right? What they need to do. They need to pay Gable. They need to back the Brinks truck up for Gable Steveson for Francis Ngannou. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but even if it's only in a couple years, but Gable Steveson is a 3-time Olympic world champion. He has all the accolades, everything you could possibly want as a wrestler.
You can't build a future with Francis. You can build a future with somebody like a Gable.
Right. And Gable's probably down to fight people for $100,000 in the heavyweight division. I'm sure he had no problem with it. Right now, he's fighting Dirty Boxing and these other regional promotions. They're not paying that kind of money.
We know Mike Perry's not shelling out that kind of dough.
Right. He's puts on good events, but it's not that kind of money. So Gable's down to fight. But with this new avenue opening up and he understands his value, especially as an Olympic champion multiple times, he might go, look, I'm one of the most athletic humans on planet Earth. Let me take 6 months to focus exclusively on boxing and I'll go fight the Predator in Francis Ngannou. I'll go toe to toe with him for 20x the money that the UFC wants to pay me. It would take me 20 fights to get up there. So why not do that? And that would be a big issue for the UFC because like we're saying, they can make stars, but Gable Stevenson seems like that one guy in the heavyweight division that if there's somebody that can have a meteoric rise, take the title, and then potentially be a star, it would be him. I don't see anybody else right now that has that same ability.
Yeah. Chris, we got anything else?
Real quick. So if they can't hear me, they won't know what I'm reading, but two fingers.
Two
like
fingers.
Okay.
Or you can click down on that and move it up and down.
Word.
Okay. So, yeah, let me see here. Chris is helping me with the technical difficulties here. Let me see where we were.
And shout out to Chris. Without him, we would not be here. He's like the Dana White.
Yeah, that is for sure. So, Real Madrid, I read a tweet from Ilia saying that, or from Islam, sorry, saying that Ilia refused the fight with Islam because his manager asked for too much money. And it's that's one of those conflicting ones, right? Because Islam is saying one thing, Ilia is saying another. You know, what's that? There's three sides to every story: my side, your side, and the truth.
Yep.
So the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. You know, Islam or Ilia is saying it's a fake hand injury at the end of the day. I don't believe the injury is fake. I believe it's real.
Mm-hmm.
Islam's saying that Ilia's camp asked for more money. There's probably some truth to that because you want to main event the White House card against, you know, the number one pound for pound fighter in the world in Islam Makhachev. It's not outrageous to think that you would want a big payday for that. So what do you think? Who do you think was more in the yes camp on that one?
On Ilia and Islam, I believe, Ilia Topuria hasn't ever seemed like a liar to me. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy that has to posture or pretend to be anything he's not. And I honestly don't think that money has been the biggest motivator for him. It's truly about legacy. I think he truly believes he can take out the entire team Khabib just by beating Islam. And then, you know, the whole thing of send 2-3 years Dagestan and forget. You know, there's a lot of Georgian wrestlers, and I get he's from all over the world, born in Germany, raised in Georgia, resides in Spain. But the narrative they're painting now is don't go 2-3 years Dagestan, go 2-3 years Georgia and forget. With Umar losing to Merab, which great fight, but still, if he can go up there, they can single-handedly sort of redirect that quote. And to me, that's not the biggest thing. I'm pulling a little bit of fun, but Ilia seems like everything he offers us is at face value, and he doesn't really try to lie about things. I think he's good at drumming up drama, but he doesn't ever fabricate the story. I don't think he would come out and just say Islam's at the end of the day, Ilia Topuria is a mixed martial artist and real recognized real. He respects Islam Makhachev. He respects the team. He knows just how good they are, and he wants to compete with them. So I like that, but I don't think he would go the direction of calling Islam a duck or a cheater or somebody who's just like trying to avoid him. Because at the end of the day, even though that was the narrative painted when Ilia moved to 155, that wasn't what happened in actuality. Islam Makhachev was getting no credit for his defenses for several fights at 55, while Ilia was still a guy climbing the ranks at 45.
Right.
He really wasn't on the register at all until he got the belt.
And in fairness, we didn't know that Ilia was going to get in there and just work over Charles Oliveira.
Right. And it was a beautiful thought from Islam Makhachev because, listen, he goes, I'm not afraid to fight Ilia Topuria. I'll fight him, but I'm done at 55. I'm not getting any more credit. And unfortunately for Ilia, if he comes up, this will be the third title defense for me against a 145er. I'm not getting enough credit. So it ends up working out really well if Ilia continues to win. Now, a win over Ilia a year ago for Islam wouldn't look near as good as a win over Ilia a year from now.
Well, yeah, that's exactly right. Well put.
Thank you.
Let's see here. So Torrin Brown, UFC fighters were getting paid during the sponsorship shorts era, but the UFC took that away 11 years ago in 2015 when they signed with Reebok. Yes, that is absolutely true.
Mm-hmm.
Mac Hash, what's up, man? Thanks for joining. He's catching an afternoon live. Let's go.
Yo.
And Mike G, wow, saw the news that Islam was ducking Ilia. That's terrible. Yes, what we were just saying. Who knows what's the truth there? There's probably some truth on both sides of the story there.
Well, and it's the same thing. Like Jon Jones is called a duck for not wanting to fight Tom Aspinall. Islam's now being called a duck. Like these guys are not afraid to fight these other people.
Right.
They're looking for the right type of timing, the right type of fight, the right type of pay. And again, I don't think any of this pay stuff comes up without Conor Benn, a relative no name, getting this money, and Dana White being the one that seems to have facilitated the
Yeah.
deal, regardless if his hands are on the $15 million or not. It's just not a good look, and he's not going to beat these allegations.
I'm telling you, dude, I said that the moment I saw it got announced, the first thing out of my mouth was, boy, he's going to have a hard time with his UFC stars.
And let me reiterate, I don't think Conor Benn doesn't deserve $15 million. I just think a lot of other people also deserve that $15 million.
Well, there's people that are bigger stars and deserve more than Conor Benn.
Right.
And so when you pay Conor Benn that, it's kind of like a comp, right? You know, when you sell a house, the house next door for $500,000, and all of a sudden, if my house is in better shape, you know, well, mine's worth more than that.
Right.
So it's basically the same thing. It's the market.
Yeah.
You know?
and Conor Benn is getting $15 million to fight a personal friend and teammate and sparring partner in Regis Prograis. So I love that for Regis, because I can only imagine if he's coming in on the B side of a fight where the guy's getting paid $15 million, you know, based off of what he used to get paid in other world title fights as a boxing champion, that he's going to make some serious money as well. So I'm happy for these guys. I really love that Netflix is willing to put on events. They believe enough in combat sports to jump into the business, even if it is one-offs. But I really do think that this whole can of worms was opened by Dana by doing this. And I just don't see him stopping. So I feel like the controversy is only at the beginning, and it's going to get deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there. Let's just hop to a couple more here before we jump.
Yeah.
Let's see. Torrin Brown says Oliveira can fight BSD next. I think they hold off to see if if Ilia beats Justin and then vacates.
Yeah.
They're going to put him in there against Armand for the rematch for the undisputed, for the vacant. We've got David Weber. Ilia's manager admitted that they refused the first UFC offer because it was too low. So I believe Islam. Yeah, very, very, very possible. And then one more.
So is there any truth to the hand injury, right?
Yeah.
Or was that just pulled out of nowhere?
Who knows?
Right.
Who knows? Yeah. And then one more from Torrin. Charles was having a lot of success on the feet with Holloway. I wish he would have entertained it more.
100% agree.
Because I believe he would have found a KO.
I do too. I honestly do too.
He certainly could have.
Yeah.
And the guy, his father and mother had never been out of Brazil. I don't know if they ever left Brazil, but certainly had never been to the United States. His dad was the one that was going to put the BMF belt on him. And Chris said this famously. Chris said, I don't think it was about anything about the, fighting for undisputed or taking a save or whatever. It was more about his dad than anything.
Yeah.
There was no way that he wasn't letting his dad put that belt around his waist.
Very true.
And if you watch the back end stuff, they're very close.
Yeah.
His dad's never been to his fights before. His mom actually refuses to watch his fights. She said she turns around when they do the announcement.
I get that.
So to me, it was cool to see his father get that opportunity to do that.
For sure.
But as a fan of Max's striking and Charles's striking,
right,
I would have loved to see some more minutes of that, but you can't fault the guy for doing what he had to do to get the win.
No.
But I think that's it. And then Konstantinos, thank you so much.
Thank
no
you,
way
brother.
Charles made less than Sean. Yeah, agreed. That's for sure. And I think that pretty much, Nick, sums it up.
Yeah, good little live. We had something to go off of. We had the MVP press conference. It was fun, but obviously so many things going on with the UFC. After this White House announcement came out, there's so many questions, so much hate. Some people really love it. Some people don't like it at all. The more I sit on this White House card, the more I can appreciate the matches. And I do believe the night of fights will live up to expectation. There's still no excuse for Bo Nickel, Kyle Dawkins being on it. But aside from that, I think Sugar Sean's going to come out there and he's going to perform and throw down for the Americans and win a 3-round fight against a guy who's not probably exclusively going to take him down. He might look for a takedown or two, but Zahabi likes to pressure forward and throw strikes as well. The main event, even though we don't think it is going to be ultimately the most competitive title fight in the world, Ilia Topuria is must-see TV, and that statement couldn't be made any more true for anybody other than Justin Gaethje.
Right.
So I love when good things happen to good people, and Justin Gaethje seems like a good guy that deserves this. Poatan, again, must-see TV. And Cyril Gane, if you hate what he did to Tom Aspinall, then you might love to watch the chance to get, to see Chama put a left hook on his face. You know, I think
just
it's
not a left finger in Chama's eye, please. That would be not. If the co-main ends in an eye poke, I'm going to lose my marbles.
Me too, brother. And yeah, so I think all in all, the card is growing on me, but at the same time, I am worried that they kind of dropped the ball a little bit with star power and name recognition.
The card's an 8 out of 10 if you just dropped it as a numbered event.
Right. It's like the BMF thing.
The
right?
fact that they said this is going to be the most absurd thing you've ever seen in your life.
Yeah.
You know, you're expecting something more. And so honestly, it's an 8 out of 10, but with the expectation it falls to maybe a 4 or 5 out of 10.
Exactly.
Guys, let us know. Did you like this midweek live? This is kind of something we're playing with, adding one more day. God knows Krista has got all the editing that he can handle right now, but the live stream kind of allows us to get these videos up without any edits. So it's a little bit more raw and we can have a chance to have a conversation with you guys on here. So thank you all for participating. We hope you enjoyed. Leave us a comment on this video if you liked it and you'd like us to keep doing it. We'd love to know. And yeah, I think, Nick, so deep dive Lerone Murphy versus Movsar Evloev is the next video that we're going to film later this week for maybe a release over the weekend, right?
Yes, and while they should have fought, one of them should have fought Volkanovski in the last fight. This is a merit-based fight where we got 2 undefeated guys, great win streaks in the UFC, doing everything, seeming like world beaters. It's the right fight, and I hope to God whoever wins that one gets a title shot.
Somebody's O's got to go.
Yep.
Thanks so much, guys. We'll see you in the next one. Have a great day.
Peace.